My name is Lena Carter. I'm 34 years old. And last Christmas, I sat at my parents' dining table while they handed out gifts to everyone in the family. Everyone except me. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't something they forgot. It was deliberate. And the worst part wasn't the missing gift. It was the way they acted like it made perfect sense. My parents' house always looked impressive during Christmas. My mother loved decorations. The tree in the living room reached almost to the ceiling, covered in gold ornaments and warm white lights. Boxes wrapped in shiny paper were stacked underneath, forming a colorful mountain. The whole family had gathered that night. My younger brother Mark was already sitting on the couch, grinning like a kid even though he was 27. My cousin Emily was filming everything on her phone. My aunt and uncle were pouring wine and talking loudly in the kitchen. The house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon, and pine needles. It should have felt warm, but sitting there, I already had a strange feeling in my chest. I had seen the gifts earlier when I arrived. There were piles under the tree with everyone's names written in big letters: Mark, Emily, Aunt Claire, Uncle David. Even the neighbors' kids had small boxes. I didn't see my name anywhere. At first, I assumed my parents had hidden mine somewhere else. That's what I told myself. Dinner ended around 8. Plates were cleared, and my mother clapped her hands with excitement. "All right, everyone," she said brightly. "Time for presents." Everyone gathered around the tree. My father picked up the first box and handed it to my brother. "Mark, this one's yours." Mark tore the paper open like a 5-year-old. Inside was a small black box. When he opened it, a car key slid into his palm. "Wait, is this real?" he asked, stunned. My father laughed proudly. Brand new SUV parked outside. The room exploded with excitement. My aunt gasped. Emily squealed. Someone rushed to the window to see it. Mark hugged my parents dramatically. "Thank you, this is insane." I clapped with everyone else, forcing a smile. Next came my cousin. She opened a long velvet box. A diamond bracelet sparkled under the Christmas lights. "Oh my God," she whispered. More cheers. Then my aunt received a luxury handbag. My uncle got a high-end watch. Even my younger cousins got expensive gaming consoles. Gift after gift. Laughter filled the room. Boxes were opened. Wrapping paper covered the floor. And slowly, the pile under the tree disappeared, until there was nothing left. No one said anything at first. I sat there quietly, hands folded in my lap. My mother looked around the room, smiling proudly at the happy chaos she had created. Then her eyes landed on me. For a moment, I thought she might suddenly remember something. Instead, she waved her hand casually. "Oh, honey," she said. "We didn't get you anything this year." The room went quiet for half a second. Then she added with a light laugh, "You're doing well anyway. You don't really need anything." A few people chuckled awkwardly. My father nodded in agreement. "That's right," he said. "Lena's the successful one. She's independent." He said it like it was a compliment, but it didn't feel like one, because independence apparently meant being invisible. I forced a small smile. "It's fine," I said. And technically, I didn't need their money. What hurt wasn't the gift. It was the message. 2 years earlier, when my mother had surgery, I quietly paid part of her hospital bill. When Mark dropped out of college for a semester because he needed time, I helped cover the remaining tuition so he wouldn't lose his place. I never mentioned those things at family dinners. I didn't want credit. But sitting there while everyone else held shiny boxes, I realized something important. In this family, generosity only flowed in one direction. Toward Mark. Toward the people who needed saving. Not toward the person who helped. My brother suddenly looked at me. "Oh," he said, still holding his new car key. "You're fine though, right?" "Yeah," I replied calmly. "I'm fine." And I meant it, because the truth was, I had built my own life far away from that living room. A life where I didn't need their approval. Still, something inside me shifted that night. Not anger. Clarity. I stayed for dessert. I laughed at the right moments. I helped my mother carry dishes into the kitchen. Then around 10, I grabbed my coat. "Leaving already?" my father asked. Early meeting tomorrow, I said. Outside, the winter air felt sharp and clean. I walked to my car, started the engine, and sat there for a moment looking back at the house glowing with Christmas lights. Inside, they were still laughing, still celebrating. None of them realized that something had quietly changed. Because while they had decided I didn't need anything from them, I had also realized something. If I wasn't part of the family when gifts were given, then I wouldn't be part of the family when money was needed either. And 2 weeks later, my phone rang. It was my father, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Lena, we need your help." 2 weeks after Christmas, my phone rang while I was sitting in my office reviewing a financial report. It was a quiet Monday morning. Sunlight came through the tall windows of my office building, reflecting off the glass table in front of me. My assistant had just dropped off coffee, and the city below was already buzzing with traffic. My phone vibrated again. "Dad." I stared at the screen for a moment. My father rarely called me directly. Most of the time he sent short texts like, "Call your mother," or "Are you coming for dinner Sunday?" So when I saw his name, I already knew something was different. I answered, "Hi, Dad." For a moment, there was only silence. Then his voice came through the speaker, slower than usual. "Lena, how are you?" That alone was unusual. My father had never been the type to ask about feelings. "I'm good," I said. "Busy with work." "Good, good." Another pause. I leaned back in my chair. "What's going on?" He cleared his throat. "Well, your mother and I were hoping you might come by the house tonight. There's something we need to talk about." I glanced at the report on my desk. Numbers from a corporate restructuring project I had been managing for months. I already knew what the conversation would be about. My parents owned a small construction company. It had done well for years, mostly because of my father's reputation and a few loyal contractors. But the last time we spoke about the business, months ago, things didn't sound stable. They had expanded too quickly. New equipment, new warehouse space, several large loans to finance it. I had warned them then. "Expansion is fine," I told my father at the time, "but you're over-leveraging. If one project fails, the cash flow could collapse." He had waved me off. "You worry too much," he said. Now, hearing the tone in his voice on the phone, I suspected the collapse had already started. "I can come by tonight," I said. "Good," he replied quickly. 7 o'clock? "Sure." When the call ended, I sat there for a moment staring at the phone. 2 weeks ago, at the Christmas table, I had been the only person without a gift. Now suddenly they wanted to talk. I didn't need to guess why. That evening, I drove to my parents' house. The Christmas lights were still hanging outside, though a few had already burned out. The inflatable snowman in the yard leaned slightly to one side, slowly deflating. Inside, the house felt different than it had on Christmas night. Quieter, tense. My mother opened the door and forced a smile. "Hi, sweetheart." Her voice sounded careful. "Hi, Mom." She stepped aside to let me in. My father was already sitting at the dining table with several papers spread in front of him. A calculator sat beside his coffee mug. That alone told me everything. My brother Mark leaned against the kitchen counter, scrolling on his phone. He barely looked up when I entered. "Hey," he muttered. "Hey." I took a seat at the table across from my father. He gathered the papers into a small stack, as if suddenly embarrassed that I could see them. "So," I said calmly, "what's going on?" My parents exchanged a quick glance. Finally, my father spoke. "We're having a temporary cash flow problem." Temporary. I had worked in finance long enough to know that word almost never meant temporary. "How temporary?" I asked. He sighed and rubbed his forehead. "One of our biggest projects fell through last month. The developer pulled out after the permits got delayed. That left us with equipment payments, payroll, and loan obligations all hitting at the same time." I nodded slowly. "And the bank?" "They're getting nervous." Of course they were. Banks love growth. They hate uncertainty. My father continued, voice tightening slightly. "We just need a little breathing room. A few months to stabilize things. I folded my hands on the table. And how exactly can I help? Another pause. This one was longer. My mother stepped forward, sitting beside my father. Well, we were hoping you might be able to help the family. The way she said family made the word feel heavy. I kept my voice neutral. What kind of help? My father looked down at the table before finally answering. A loan. There it was. I nodded once. How much? He hesitated. Long enough that I already knew the number would be big. Finally, he said quietly. $300,000. The room went completely still. My brother finally looked up from his phone. My mother watched my face nervously. 300,000? The same people who, 2 weeks earlier, had decided I didn't need anything. Now they were asking me to save their company. I leaned back in my chair and asked the only question that mattered. Do you remember Christmas dinner? The room went quiet after I asked the question. Do you remember Christmas dinner? My father frowned slightly. Of course we remember Christmas dinner, he said. What does that have to do with anything? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I looked around the dining room. It was the same table, the same chairs, the same chandelier above us. 2 weeks earlier, this room had been full of laughter, wrapping paper, and shiny boxes. Now the only thing on the table was a stack of financial statements and a calculator. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same family, I said calmly. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Lena, honey, this isn't the time for jokes. I'm not joking. My brother Mark rolled his eyes. Seriously? We're bringing up Christmas now? I ignored him and looked at my father. At Christmas, I continued, you gave Mark a new SUV. My brother straightened a little, clearly still proud of it. You gave Emily a diamond bracelet. My mother looked down at her hands. You gave Aunt Claire a luxury handbag and Uncle David a watch. I paused. And when the gifts were finished, Mom said, Oh, honey, we didn't get you anything this year. You're doing well anyway. The words hung in the air. My mother sighed. Oh, Lena, that again. Yes, I said quietly. That again. My father leaned back in his chair, clearly irritated. You're seriously holding a Christmas gift against your own parents? No, I said. I'm remembering it. There's a difference. Mark finally put his phone down on the counter. Come on, he said. You're successful. You've got money. Why are you acting like this is a big deal? I looked at him. Because it wasn't about the gift. He frowned. Then what was it about? It was about being invisible. No one spoke. So I continued. For years, I've helped this family when things got difficult. I turned to my mother. When you had surgery 2 years ago, I paid part of the hospital bill. She didn't look up. Then I looked at my father. When the company needed a short-term cash injection during the pandemic, I transferred $80,000. My father shifted in his chair. And when Mark dropped out of college for a semester, I added, glancing at my brother, I helped cover the remaining tuition so he wouldn't lose his place. Mark's expression tightened. I never asked for recognition, I said calmly. I never mentioned it at family dinners. I leaned slightly forward. But Christmas showed me something important. My father crossed his arms. And what exactly did it show you? That when this family celebrates generosity, I'm not included. The silence in the room became heavy. My mother finally spoke. Lena, you're misunderstanding. You're the strong one. You don't need gifts like the others. That's not strength, I said quietly. That's convenience. She looked hurt. But I wasn't trying to hurt her. I was stating the truth. Mark suddenly scoffed. This is ridiculous. He pushed himself away from the counter and walked closer to the table. You're rich now, he said. Why are you acting selfish over something so small? I looked at him calmly. Because this moment was familiar. Every time something went wrong, someone else was expected to fix it. Usually me. I'm not acting selfish, I said. Then what are you doing? He demanded. I met his eyes. I'm learning. He frowned. Learning what? I folded my hands on the table again. I'm learning how this family works. My father sighed loudly. Lena, we don't have time for this discussion. The bank is breathing down our necks. We need help now. I nodded slowly. Yes, you do. Then I asked a quiet question. The $80,000 I gave you 2 years ago. My father stiffened. What about it? Was that a loan? His expression hardened. That was family helping family. Interesting, I said. Because now suddenly this was different. Now suddenly they needed a loan. Mark threw his hands in the air. So what? You're going to refuse your own parents because they didn't give you a Christmas present. I looked at him and answered honestly, no. I paused. I'm refusing because this isn't the first time you've asked. The room went completely silent. My father stared at me. What are you saying? I held his gaze. You already owe me $80,000. No one spoke. And you never paid it back. I finished. My mother looked stunned. Mark looked annoyed. But my father looked like he was finally realizing something, that the daughter they had quietly relied on for years had stopped being the person who automatically said yes. And the hardest part for them wasn't the money. It was the fact that the answer they were about to hear might not be the one they expected. The silence in the room stretched longer than anyone expected. My father stared at the table. My mother kept rubbing the edge of her coffee mug like she was trying to smooth something invisible. Mark leaned against the counter again. But this time, he wasn't scrolling on his phone. He was watching me, waiting. Finally, my father spoke. So what are you saying? He asked. His voice wasn't angry yet, just tight. I'm saying we should be honest about what's happening. I replied. We are being honest, he said quickly. No, I said calmly. You're being desperate. That word landed heavily. My mother immediately jumped in. Lena, please don't make this harder than it already is. I'm not, I said. I'm making it clear. My father rubbed his temples. Look, the situation is simple, he said. The company is under pressure. The bank is threatening to freeze our credit line if we miss the next payment. How much is the payment? I asked. $200,000 next Friday, he said. And the rest of the $300,000? Operating costs, he admitted. Payroll, equipment leases, insurance. Things that couldn't be delayed. I nodded slowly. So the company is running out of cash. It's temporary, he said again. I didn't argue with the word this time. Instead, I leaned back slightly in my chair. Let me ask you something, I said. My father looked up. When you handed out gifts on Christmas, what did you think I would feel sitting there with nothing? My mother sighed. Lena, we already talked about that. No, I said gently. You brushed it off. Mark groaned loudly. This again? Yes, I said, turning toward him. This again. Because the moment mattered. Not because of the gift. Because of what it represented. You all laughed, I continued. You made jokes about how I didn't need anything because I was the successful one. My father shifted in his seat. That was a compliment? No, I said. It was a dismissal. The room grew quiet again. Success doesn't mean someone stops being part of the family. I continued. It shouldn't mean they're the only person expected to give. My mother's voice softened. We didn't think you cared about those things. I didn't care about the gift, I said. I cared about being forgotten. That landed harder than anything else I had said. My father finally looked directly at me. All right, he said slowly. So what are you trying to prove? I'm not proving anything. Then what are you doing? I held his gaze. I'm reminding you how respect works. My brother scoffed. Respect? Over a Christmas present? I shook my head. No. Over years. The words came out calm, but clear. For years. When something went wrong, you called me. When Mark needed help with tuition. When the company had a short-term gap. When medical bills appeared. And every time I helped. Not because I had to, because I believed family meant showing up when things got hard. But sitting at that Christmas table had shown me something I hadn't wanted to admit. In this family, my role had quietly become something else. The safety net. The backup plan. The person you call when everything starts collapsing. My father exhaled slowly. So you're punishing us now? No, I said. I'm setting a boundary. That word seemed to confuse him more than anger would have. A boundary? Yes. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin folder. My father looked at it suspiciously. What's that? I placed it on the table. A plan. He frowned. What kind of plan? The kind that might actually save your company. My mother leaned forward slightly. My father opened the folder. Inside were printed financial projections, cost reduction strategies, and debt negotiation outlines. I had prepared it the night before. Not because I had decided to help, but because I wanted them to understand something. I wasn't refusing out of spite. I was refusing out of clarity. My father flipped through the pages. What is all this? A restructuring strategy, I said. It included reducing equipment leases, negotiating new payment schedules with the bank, selling unused machinery, cutting unnecessary administrative costs. Mark frowned. This looks complicated. It is, I said. But it works. My father stared at the last page. If we follow this, you can stabilize the company within 6 months. He looked up slowly. And the loan? I folded my hands on the table. There isn't one. My mother blinked. You're not giving us anything? I'm giving you the only help that actually fixes the problem. Advice, structure, a way forward. Not another bailout. My father leaned back heavily in his chair. For the first time since I arrived, he looked tired instead of proud. This would have been easier if you just said yes, he muttered. Yes, I replied quietly. It would have been easier, but easy had never actually solved their problems. And deep down, I think he knew that. Across the room, Mark looked frustrated. You're really not giving us the money? No, the word came out calm. Final. My father closed the folder slowly. And if this doesn't work? I met his eyes. Then the company fails. No one spoke. Because for the first time in this conversation, I wasn't rescuing them. I was telling them the truth. And sometimes the truth feels harsher than rejection. But it was also the first real chance they had to change what had been slowly breaking for years. For a moment, no one spoke. My father stared down at the folder like it was written in another language. My mother kept glancing between us, clearly hoping someone would say something that made this easier. Mark didn't wait. He slammed his hand on the counter. This is unbelievable. His voice was louder now. You're really going to let Mom and Dad lose their company over some stupid principle? I looked at him calmly. I'm not letting anything happen. Oh, please, he snapped. You have the money. You could fix this in 10 seconds. That's exactly the problem, I said. He frowned. What problem? You think money fixes everything? Mark laughed bitterly. Apparently it does. That's why they called you. My father raised a hand slightly. Mark. But Mark wasn't finished. No. Seriously, he said, turning toward our parents. Why are we even begging her? She's got more money than all of us combined. That wasn't entirely true, but it was close enough. My consulting firm had grown quickly over the past 5 years. We specialized in financial restructuring for struggling companies. Ironically, the exact situation my parents were now facing. But Mark didn't care about the irony. All he saw was access. Access to money he thought I owed the family. You know what this is? He continued, pointing at me. This is revenge. I tilted my head slightly. Revenge for what? For Christmas, he said. For not getting a stupid present. My mother quickly jumped in. Mark, stop. But he ignored her. You've always been like this, he continued. Quiet. Judging everyone from the corner. I let him talk. Sometimes people reveal the truth when they're angry. You think you're better than us now because you're successful, he added. No, I said. I know I made different choices. That only irritated him more. Oh, here we go, he said sarcastically. Miss Perfect? Mark, my father said sharply, but Mark had already crossed the line. You know what? He said. Maybe Mom was right at Christmas. My mother's head snapped toward him. Mark, you don't need anything, he continued, looking at me. Because you're the one who left. That sentence hung in the air. Left, like it was an accusation. I took a slow breath. Yes, I said. I did leave. I left when I was 22. I left this town. I left this house. I left the expectation that my entire life should revolve around fixing problems I didn't create. But leaving didn't mean I stopped caring. That's why I had helped before. My father finally spoke again. "That's enough," he said firmly to Mark. Mark threw his hands in the air. "Fine." He grabbed his jacket from the back of the chair. "This whole thing is ridiculous anyway." He walked toward the door, but stopped just before leaving. "You'll regret this," he said to me. Then he slammed the door behind him. The house fell silent again. My mother looked exhausted. "He's under a lot of stress," she said quietly. I nodded. "So are you." My father rubbed his face slowly. "I didn't expect this conversation to go like this." "How did you expect it to go?" I asked gently. He didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. He expected me to say yes, the way I always had before. My mother finally spoke again. "If we follow this plan," she said softly, tapping the folder, "it will give you a real chance," I replied. "But it won't be easy," she nodded slowly. "And the loan?" "No," she didn't argue. "Not this time." My father looked up at me again. "You really believe this will work?" "Yes." "And you won't step in if it fails?" I held his gaze. "No." He leaned back in his chair and exhaled slowly. For the first time in my life, my father looked at me not like a daughter he could rely on automatically, but like a professional giving him hard advice. And strangely enough, that seemed to earn more respect than any amount of money ever had. Finally, he closed the folder. "All right," he said quietly. "We'll try it your way." That sentence changed everything, because for the first time, they weren't asking me to rescue them. They were accepting responsibility for the outcome, and whether they succeeded or failed next would depend entirely on what they chose to do next. 6 months passed. In business, 6 months can feel like a lifetime. In a struggling company, it feels like a countdown. After that night, I didn't hear from my parents for a while. No late-night phone calls, no sudden emergencies, no requests for just a little help. At first, I wasn't sure if that meant they were angry with me or simply too busy trying to keep the company alive. Probably both. But once a month, my father sent a short email. No greetings, no small talk, just updates. Month 1, sold 2 unused excavators, negotiating new loan schedule with bank. Month 2, payroll stabilized, equipment lease renegotiated. Month 3, 1 contractor returned for a smaller project. The updates were brief, but something about them was different. For the first time in years, my father wasn't pretending everything was perfect. He was being realistic, and strangely enough, that was progress. One afternoon in early summer, I received another message. This one was longer. "We followed most of your restructuring plan. Bank extended our credit line. We're not out of trouble yet, but the company is stable for now." Then, after a pause in the email, there was one more line. "You were right." That was it. 3 words. My father had never said those words to me before. 2 weeks later, my mother called. Her voice sounded lighter than it had in months. "Lena, are you free for dinner this weekend?" I hesitated. "Why?" "Well," she said carefully, "your father wanted you to see something." Saturday evening, I drove back to their house. The Christmas lights were gone now. The yard looked normal again. Inside, the atmosphere felt different. Not tense like the night they asked for the loan. Just quiet. My father was sitting at the dining table again. The same place where that conversation had started 6 months earlier. But this time, there were no stacks of unpaid invoices. Instead, there was a single folder. He slid it toward me. I opened it. Inside were the company's updated financial statements. Revenue smaller than before, but stable. Debt reduced. Cash flow positive. I looked up. "You actually followed the plan." My father gave a small nod. "Most of it." My mother smiled. "Your father hated selling the old equipment." "I still hate it," he muttered, but there was a hint of humor in his voice. Then he looked at me seriously. "You saved the company." I shook my head. "No, you did." "You could have given us the money," he said. "Yes, but you didn't." "No." He leaned back in his chair, and somehow that helped more. It was the closest thing to an apology he had ever given. That December, almost exactly 1 year after the Christmas dinner where I received nothing, We gathered again at my parents' house. The decorations were back. The tree was glowing, but something about the room felt different, calmer. Dinner ended, and my mother clapped her hands like she always did. "All right, everyone," she said. "Time for presents." Everyone moved toward the tree again. This time, when the gifts were handed out, my mother reached under the tree and pulled out a small box. She walked over and handed it to me. "Lena," she said softly. I opened it. Inside was a simple silver bracelet. Not expensive, not flashy, but that wasn't the point. My father cleared his throat. "We realized something this year," he said. Everyone looked at him. "You've been showing up for this family for a long time," he continued. "We should have noticed sooner." The room was quiet. Then he added something I had waited years to hear. "We're proud of you, not because I had money, not because I could solve their problems, just because of who I was." And that made the small bracelet feel heavier than any expensive gift in the room. Later that night, as I drove home, I thought about the difference between last Christmas and this one. Last year, I had sat at that table feeling invisible. This year, they finally saw me. But the real change wasn't the bracelet. It wasn't the apology. It was the boundary. Because sometimes the most important thing you can give your family is not money. It's the moment you stop rescuing them and start letting them grow. And strangely enough, that was the gift that saved all of us.